This September, we're focusing on stillness. And if you're ready to take that journey deeper, I'd love for you to grab a copy of my brand new book, Living Unmasked, an autistic woman's guide to get into your comfort zone. You'll get both the ebook and audiobook together for just $9.99. It's filled with gentle practices and insights to help you step into a burnout free, joy filled life. If you'd like to save $5, grab your special code when you register for Self Care September. You can find it at whittingtonwellbeing.com. Amalia, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to the show. The conversation that you and I are going to share is one that I think needs to happen every day, all over the world. And I think every woman needs to know this, to hear this. And I'm so thankful for our mutual friend, Lori, and so grateful for her as she introduced us. And I immediately went, oh my gosh, Amalia, we have to have a conversation and share what you've just told me with the Beyond Chronic Burnout audience, because this is huge. When we talk about the root method that you've developed and teach as a path to safety and sovereignty, talk to me about sovereignty and our body literacy and why the root and safety. Tell me all the goodness.
Okay. Of course I will. I would never hold back. Well, thank you, Carol. I appreciate it. Carol Jean. And okay, so the root chakra is where you wanted to start, right? Like what the importance of that is. The root chakra is our foundational chakra. Energetically, we visualize it at the base of our spine, and it is the chakra that is sensitive to our nervous system. I like to call it the safety system, and our sense of physical safety and also like abundance and pleasure. Also our connection to our body, like our ability to have proprioception, interoception, just our sensory cortex being well conditioned and able to toggle back and forth between a high stimulation environment and a low stimulation environment, and be able to turn down the senses when needed and turn up the senses when needed. And this is all skills and abilities that relate back to the root chakra. When we start to falter in these ways, energetically, the root chakra is compromised. And when we think of this from a spiritual or energetic place, the root chakra is at the bottom. It is the foundation. And I have found in my time, not only as a teacher, but also as a learner and a seeker and a student, that there's a lot of focus on all of these other things. We want to build our connection to the spiritual world and our intuition and our voice and our willpower and our heart space. And honestly, none of them can really have like a long lasting, none of those spaces in our body or mind or personal development can really hold on to any long-lasting development without a solid functioning root. And when we think of this from an anatomical place, the root is our pelvic floor. It is the bottom of our spine. Our pelvic floor is from tailbone to pubic bone and sits bone to sits bone. So it's literally exactly our anatomical root. And it also is, just like the energetic root, incredibly responsive to the nervous system, a safety system. And so understanding ourselves on these layers from the anatomical to the energetic, and understanding that physically also the pelvic floor is sort of this catch-all for our patterns, our tissue patterns, our breath patterns, our thought patterns, and how the brain-breath tissue relationship connect is incredibly connected to our root chakra and also our pelvic floor, which are essentially one and the same. And it's not like a coincidence. The pelvic floor is like one of those things that we are just becoming more aware of, I think, in its integration with our total health. I think for a long time it just wasn't touched, and then it was touched as sort of like a specialty niche. And I was through, I've been in the industry long enough to be like ride all of these waves and impressions of the importance of this relatively small structure in our body. But the fact is that it is at the bottom of our pelvis and the bottom of our breathing structure, and therefore every posture, every breath, every movement pattern biomechanically, I mean, we're all connected. So you could say this to an extent about any part of the body, but the pelvic floor is really high on that list of just being impacted by our total vitality, our total mental and physical health.
What are some of the signs that women come to you with when they're saying, something's not right, Amalia? This is
Sure.
what's going on with me. So what are some of the big things that people are usually struggling with or having a challenge with?
Okay, so thank you for asking that question, because pelvic floor issues are sometimes hard to identify. Number one, because they're not, people aren't comfortable talking about it. And also, sometimes they don't show up exactly, like you don't have the pelvic floor pain. Pudendal nerve pain, vaginismus, vulvodynia, these are all pains and tightnesses of the actual vagina and pelvic floor. And then prolapse, so that's like when the organs start to feel heavy in the body and start to lose their proper place. So that sometimes shows up as like feeling a heaviness in the pelvic region, or I've had women say it feels like I have like a tampon in, but I don't, kind of thing. So just sort of an obstruction or something just not quite right. I just did another training over the last weekend, a hypopressives training, which is so cool. And I would love to share that more about that with you another day. But I learned a statistic that, it's varying depending on the groups, but just how many women suffer from incontinence, stress incontinence, like we just think it's normal. Like if you're aging, or if you are a weightlifter, or if you are a mother, then you are going to, and you have, if you sneeze when you jump or pee or feel urgency from those actions, that's just part of being a woman. And it's not. It is common, but it's not normal in the sense that we are meant to just accept it as part of our natural body process. I'm really for accepting our natural body processes. I'm not one that wants to push against the aging process and be fearful of it. But also, I think that we have a concept of aging that is just not true. That really our concept of aging is just the years and years of the load that we carry biomechanically and chemically, from stress and from, poor habits that obviously then create the outcome that we perceive as inevitable from aging or motherhood or whatever. But it's not. And and it can, diastasis, the spreading apart of the muscles and the rectus abdominis. These are all things that most mainstream medicine will tell you you need to fix surgically or is not fixable. And I have seen hundreds, and I've worked with women. So like all the women I know that have healed women, and that's, helped women heal themselves in that situation, plus all the women I have helped heal themselves in that situation, it's thousands upon thousands. I'll tell you, it's absolutely not true that surgery, and a lot of the time surgery can be a hindrance because it's not addressing the reason why it happened. So then the breath pattern, the postural pattern, the neurological disconnection that is causing the dysfunction, the prolapse or the incontinence, is still not being addressed. And the surgery can actually cause more issues, coupled with the fact that the root cause, which is a reason why I created the root method, is to be looking at root causes and looking at these aspects of the root chakra and how they relate to our total physical and mental wellness. But yeah, I mean, in the end, we can't Band-Aid it, it's definitely changeable. We can have faith that we can change it. And also it's not a quick fix where we can hand our power to someone else and let them do it for us. It almost never works. Darn.
No, it doesn't. No. And as much as we would want like a quick fix to our discomfort and our suffering, sometimes it's when we invest in going to the root, causational foundation of why all of these things are symptomatic in our bodies and in our minds. And it's so interesting as you talk about breath, one of the things that in my research has been mentioned so often, and I have this conversation on the regular in our autistic and ADHD groups, and it's we hold our breath so often and don't even realize it. And I find that women report this more often to me than men. It's like, oh, I caught myself, and all of a sudden I'll just go, because I've been holding my breath trying to concentrate. And as I was thinking about my own journey, especially around incontinence, I thought that I didn't have enough muscle tone in my pelvic region after having children. So of course, I'm doing all the Kegels and all the things, and come to find out about 2 years ago, I was actually hypertensive. I was so tight. It was the reason that I was having incontinence issues. And when we talk about, there's so much, you and I talked about this in the green room, there's so much gatekeeping around our own bodies, our own health and wellness as women. And, one of the things in this perimenopause journey that I've had is all of the research and the conversations I've been having. And we have estrogen receptors in our shoulder. And that's why we tend, when our estrogen levels are dropping during perimenopause and beyond, that we get diagnosed with frozen shoulder, or we have this hip pain that just won't go away, and it gets worse during certain times of the month, and that's particularly when your estrogen levels and progesterone levels are dropping. And it's, oh my goodness, it's not that I've pulled something. It's not that I'm overexerting myself. It's not that I have arthritis. It's simply the root is a drop in estrogen levels. And so then I have gluteal tendonitis or tendinopathy, all of these things. And as you were talking about how it all ties together and how everything is all connected, and when we can go back to the root, what an amazing place that is, because that brings in that sovereignty, that brings in that personal power that we so often as women have given away or leaked out, not even realizing it in our
Sure.
journey.
I thank you for bringing that up, because the one thing that I forgot to mention that was in my mental list before I rabbit holed is that most people with regular hip, SI, low back, piriformis pain have pelvic floor issues. That our internal hip rotators are actually directly connected to our pelvic floor. That, so a lot of the time, if it's not a pelvic pain, usually still we're talking about, pelvic floor is also just fully integrated with our deep core system. So, it's understanding that whole system, the pressure system of our breathing mechanism and our deep core support, and the way, we have been disempowered because we have taught that health is an external practice on our end. Like, what we can control is our calories and our calories in and out, like we need to be exercising to this end, which is, different than exercising to learn and improve our biomechanics, to continue to orient and know our bodies better. It's a very different approach when you exercise that way. And it doesn't mean that it's always slow, but like slowness has to be a part of it, because we have to orient to like, what is happening in my body? What's the mechanics of this movement? And then, intensity is welcome sometimes. And as far as, the hormonal piece, it is, I've seen so much hype around like the people over here banging their pots and pans around, you have to cycle sync. Cycle syncing is like the key to life. And then over here, it's like, well, it doesn't actually, have any impact on your ability to build muscle or burn fat or whatever. And it's all just like a trend. And I feel like we're missing the point, which is that, the point is embodiment, not like the outcome of it. The point is that we are in tune with our bodies well enough to say, not that, oh, this course taught me to eat this during this phase and this during that phase and do this kind of exercise.
Thank you for saying this. This is like the most important part of this conversation. And it's so important, and it gets left out. You are not wrong in that. And It's not that we're doing the things, because that's usually we're looking for, what do I need to do? Tell me how to do it and give me the checklist and I'm going to check it
Right.
off. And that doesn't serve us. It's
No.
how are we being in
Right.
alignment? How are we embodying what it is that we are processing and what it is that we are experiencing? Oh my gosh. Yes.
Yeah, like the courses that will guide you in what to do during your cycle, that can give you a framework for maybe what you are looking to notice and match up your experience to this external framework, because we were never handed this wisdom in our rites of passage the way we were meant to. Our rites of passage were not just meant to be celebrations and time where you like buy things or, whatever it is nowadays. We've kind of abandoned that idea in our culture for the most part. But if we do think of it, it's like a birthday party or a wedding, and it's a little bit, it's lacking this true rite of passage energy. And that's when wisdom is passed and a threshold is crossed and your elders are sharing with you what they know, so that you can now have a framework to do self-exploration. And that is, I think we really have to take the external information and be able to match it up to what we are feeling. Otherwise, it's not very helpful to say, well, I should be doing this at this time in my cycle. So I should have this kind of energy, this kind of food, and this kind of exercise. But what is your body telling you? What are you noticing about those signals? Because in noticing that there is dissonance, you're also gathering a tremendous amount of important information. If you realize you're not feeling that surge of energy and extrovertedness and sexiness and your estrogen rise, then do you need to support estrogen? And maybe you don't always need to rely on, diagnostics and quantification. Maybe we can just trust our own feelings and our body guidance sometimes. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how we landed there, but I could tell that it meant a lot to both of us. So I wanted to be there for
Yes.
them.
Thank you. Because that truly is it is, I think, the core of the conversation that you and I are having today, Amalia, and that is, how are we allowing space and stepping into our personal power to listen to our intuition, to listen to our bodies, to listen to our higher selves, and to really honor it? Not just go, oh yeah, I hear you, but I'm not listening to you. I'm not
Right.
doing anything about it, right?
Yeah, that's step 2. I think step 1 is like, how to even know, like, what is the body speaking? I'm not sure. I haven't slowed down enough. Or when I do
Yeah.
slow down, I don't know what this bottom up information is. And that's where
Yes.
the intellect and the literacy piece comes in, because, first we can't even get the bottom up information. We're so numbed out. We're so busy. We're so ignoring. Then we learn that we need to do that, and we get this bottom up information, and it's overwhelming and disconcerting, and because we don't know what to do with that, because we don't have the literacy piece. We need to know what these sensations should be guiding us towards as far as an exploration, and that is where we are meant to share wisdom and not gatekeep and learn from one another. And then you have this piece where you can actually, it's actionable. The sensations that you're feeling will guide you to an action in service to those feelings. And that is, if you operate, I don't believe that we should be comfortable all the time or feel really good all the time. And some of the best things for us make us really uncomfortable. But you will know what kind of discomfort you're bumping up against if you have a regular practice of being with your body at a baseline. And so we have to get to know what she feels like at a baseline with no external disruptions and expectations, and practicing pulling all of that energy back in. Then when we're pulled away from it, we have a much more practiced awareness of, what is this? Is this a discomfort that is a yes or a no? Is this, even just as simple as I have a headache and I have a list of stuff to do. Am I going to choose to abandon myself because I am more committed to the list than I am to my body? So I got to take the ibuprofen or 4 and then keep trucking through. Or am I going to listen? Am I going to stop the stimulus and hydrate and rest for a moment and do some self-massage to see if I can move the needle on this signal from my body? And that's like a little thing, but it's those little things that resource us so that we have room for pleasure and we have room for our dreams and we have, it's like room for health. It's vitality. It's in those little tiny pieces.
Oh, if I only had one of those buttons I could do that just the whole crowd cheers and goes wild, I would use it right now.
we can do our poetry slam snaps.
Yeah, I'm going to do my ASL celebration. So, Amalia, take us to the creation of the root method. What experience or what happened in your life that brought you to create the root method?
Well, this is a long story that I'm going to make short because it's really a culmination of, over 2 decades of working with women and myself and my own personal experiences. But I've been a Pilates and a master Pilates trainer for over 20 years. I've worked a lot with women pre and postpartum, and pelvic floor has always been a really big interest, especially because there was a lot of misinformation early in my career about it. And then my own personal experience of having a baby and having an emergency C-section. And this was, like a planned home birth, and I had no desire for medical intervention. And it was, 4 days long and super traumatic. And that's another podcast for another day. And so the birth and like that was a reckoning for me. The pregnancy was very troubled, birth was very troubled, baby was always fine, but like I wasn't. This started me on a path of getting to know my womb in a different way, and a less clinical and intellectual way. Like I knew when I bled, I knew when I ovulated, I knew how to avoid pregnancy, I knew how to achieve pregnancy. I got pregnant on the first try, and I thought I was winning. Like I knew my body, but I didn't really know my body because I was really missing the self-love and reverence piece. I was really missing that piece that I was like, there's magic in here that I really have to connect with. And especially my womanhood that was so like over there on the side. Like I had real reverence for the pelvic floor and the whole biomechanics of the body. And I was already a breathwork instructor and, a holistic healthcare practitioner, all the things. And it just didn't really ground down into like, I really realized how much fear and programming and all of that was in my tissue. Like for instance, my baby, like my cervix just wouldn't open after almost 4 days. And this just led me on, I believe it was very much for me. And it led me on a personal journey of really wanting to connect with myself in this way. And then I think the sort of culmination was that my sister had a very aggressive form of cancer and died very quickly in medical care that I thought was like just I just couldn't believe it that they were doing what they were doing. And I didn't have a lot of power in it. And she was so afraid that she just was doing what they were telling her to do. And she died of chemo, not cancer. She died of chemo and radiation. And the cancer didn't even have a chance. And it really, that loss and that fear, the fear-based decision-making and the disempowerment in that, coupled with all of these years of, body exploration and self-exploration, that's really when it gelled for me. And this method really had a name and a true like foundation. And this is really how I have been teaching for 20 years. But then all of a sudden I was like, I get it, like now I really have a point on it. And that is that, our connection to our body and to safety and to pleasure and to being resourced and to being able to breathe into our whole cavity and to the earth, like all our barriers between us and nature and how that disrupts our vitality, our energetically, chemically, hormonally, biomechanically, all of these screens and shoes and waist trainers and compression pants and, just all the things, even toilets, all of these things are disrupting our natural intelligent design. Like we are designed intelligently, and then we had the hubris of thinking we could improve upon it, and we've continued to mess it up. And
We
so,
somehow think we know better than what's already been designed.
yes, like however you want to call God, there is a creative force that has imbued our entire existence, from the cosmos to the microbiome of our gut and the dirt and everything in between, with an order that our minds cannot fathom of. And if we don't really get on board with that miracle and think that we can somehow hack and bioengineer our bodies into an improved form of how we were designed to be, we always get womped. We always have another thing coming. And so like this
Womped is a good word for that. We
womped,
do. We get womped. It's
and
like the Whomping Willow from Harry Potter. I always think about the big giant tree. We do. We just get beat with this big giant
yeah, we
tree
just keep
whomping
doing
us.
it, and we get back up, and we keep knocking ourselves
Bless
back
our
down.
hearts. We keep
Yes,
getting back up,
yes,
doing
we
the
do,
same
and
thing
God bless.
again.
I have a huge respect for the human spirit in that way, and I do see like great hope in that. And I think that we are womping ourselves because we have been handed this model. You know, if we think about kind of abuse, how it works is that somebody abuses you, and then you kind of take it on yourself in a way. You carry those beliefs about yourself, and that is kind of the relationship we have with the mainstream culture. It was sort of abusive to us in the beginning when we were developing our neural connections, and then we started imposing that same sort of abusive mindset onto ourselves, and we have to stop. We connect with that as though it's part of our belonging and our worth, and it takes a long time to untangle from that sense of safety. Like if we do this, we'll be safe. If we achieve, we'll be safe. If we abandon ourselves, we'll be safe because we'll be a part of the rest. And there is such a deprogramming that's involved, and this is, I believe, really done effectively through body literacy. Because how can we feel our internal guidance system if we are incredibly numb? How do we know what the right decision is when we have stopped letting other people make our decisions? And that is like a very crazy liminal space to be in. Like, I think you are all like slave driving us, and I don't believe this mainstream story anymore. But then, like, what do I actually care about? What do I actually like? What is purposeful and meaningful to me outside of that paradigm? Like, how do you find that? And that is through body literacy. That is through being able to pick up on the subtle cues of your body, how the posture changes, how the heart rate and hormones shift, how the breath changes and the facial expression. And there is biomarkers to all of our thoughts, all of our beliefs. And if we understand that posture is actually reinforcing that thought, then as we start to become more attuned to our postures and breaths, we can also become more attuned to what programs we're running and what we want to replace it with. And then that starts to bloom within this like guidance of that kind of guidance from the womb or the gut, that more somatic level of cognition and decision making.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, the unpacking of this and just recognizing that when we step into this place, and this is one of the most beautiful and scary places. It feels like there's no solid footing when we begin this journey. It feels like there's nothing under our feet because I don't know who I am. I don't know what I like. But it's through this journey and this connecting with our physical body and this body literacy that really begins to help us take those steps, those uncomfortable steps, but in a way that it is through our own design and intention. So, Amalia, talk to us about the integration of the root into our hormonal and pelvic health and that HPA axis
Okay.
that you mentioned.
Okay. Well, I brought this up because our womanhood, which we've touched on, and our unique kind of setup is particularly responsive to our safety system. And that is, we are biologically made to be different than men. And there's a synergy in that makes biological sense. So if we think of the polarity of men and women are meant to be more sensitive. We are meant to be closer to the earth. We're meant to pick up on the subtle cues. So our receptors are a little bit more open. We're the dreamers. We're embodying souls, actually souls, right? So this is how we create babies. But we're also embodying ideas, creation, right? So we are the macro kind of energy in the family where we're connected to that greater sense. However, that leaves us more vulnerable. I know I'm like way over here, but I'll come back soon. It leaves us more vulnerable, right? And our male counterparts are more tolerant of environmental factors. They're more tolerant of, adrenal stress and all of these things, right? So their system is different than ours. And most medical studies are not done with that with that in mind. So when we look at the efficacy of something, of cold plunging, of fasting, of this or that, we are often not looking at a pool that represents us. So that, we have to be taking that into consideration when we're making decisions. And so when we talk about our pelvic floor and our hormonal health, we are looking at the bottom of the chain of two very important functions in our body. So the pelvic floor is at the bottom of the chain of breath. And if we, for instance, this is just one of many ideas, but let's say we believe that we are more worthy or safer if we have a flat stomach. So we hold our abdominals in, or we change our posture in a way that makes us look smaller in the center. And this is kinking our breath and limiting the signals and the dynamic movement of everything below that muscle tension. So our digestion suffers and our pelvic floor suffers. So that's one idea of how the brain affects the tissue and the posture and then affects the pelvic floor, right? So when we are running these stress patterns or these unworthiness programs, then we are affecting our pelvic floor in a very biomechanical way. And the HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And this is basically the conversation in your body that's saying, okay, what are the environmental factors? How resourced am I? Where are my adrenals? And what can we, because our hormones are made in our adipose tissue and our adrenal glands, primarily our sex hormones. So we have to resource these things first because they keep us safe. So if we're always resourcing our cortisol and our sympathetic nervous system function, then we have less to give to the hormone bucket because it's less important, right? And it also is our body saying, hey, we don't want to procreate right now. It's not a safe environment, so it's not a good idea to get pregnant. And whether or not you want to get pregnant, you want a hormonal environment that would welcome pregnancy because that is vitality. And that's really the confluence of these two things, the pelvic floor and the HPA axis, are both basically illustrating that they are indications of vitality. We're not going to have good pelvic floor function, and we are not going to have good hormonal function if we are not tending to the whole. And when we are feeling, compromised in those areas, it's not something that we can zero in on and say, I'm going to fix my hormones, or I'm going to fix my pelvic floor and box check the self-care. I'm not sure if we were on or off air when we were talking about this, but this is about embodiment, right? This is about being able to feel what is needed to be able to slow down and tend to the global needs of the body in order for these systems to be working optimally. And of course, also the hormonal health is affecting the pelvic floor health because of the tissues of the pelvic floor are tremendously affected by proper hormone levels. So it's all connected. And it's basically asking us to, as women, to really reorient to what we think about our bodies, how important our well-being is. And that's why I think so many of us have symptoms in this area, because it's like a collective time of consciousness upgrade and revolution.
Yes. I mean, there's so much that I've got like whiz popping in my brain that I am agreeing with so wholeheartedly, and so many things that are also just connecting even deeper for me on my end. I think one of the things that is so important around what we're talking about, not just, the sovereignty and the embodiment of ourselves in our feminine energy and in our femaleness, it's this slowing down. It's this allowing space when we have been in this fight or flight and we have been in survival mode, as specifically as women, and have been in burnout for so long. So the cascade of the system-wide impact of that long-term chronic stress and burnout has really wreaked havoc on our physical body and in our mind. And we have gotten into the habit, this habituated state of constantly being on, always being, what do I check the box? How do I make sure everyone around me is okay so that I can be okay? Make sure everything is done, everything is taken care of, because then maybe I've earned enough that I can give myself maybe 5 minutes just to sit. And I think one of the things that you do that is so beautiful is to create a space and invite people in to begin to experience the stillness. And how do we begin to do that?
Well, I think that what you said is very resonant. I think that that's such a relatable state of mind, because somehow in abandoning ourselves, we have been taught that that is our greatest worth and our greatest service. And the first thing that I like to remind women that I work with is that your body is an oracle. It's not malfunctioning. It's not a car that has a broken part that you need to replace or fix. It is guiding you. It is showing you exactly what you need to be looking at. And so you can trust it. You don't have to be an adversary with it. When it's telling you like that you need to rest, it's not betraying you when you need more energy to do more things. But then we get to the space where we know we value rest, but we're so uncomfortable there. And most people really don't like rest unless they're ping-ponging between hyper and hypo nervous system states. And it's not real rest, right? A lot of people rest with wine and pizza and Netflix because they need to go into some sort of hole to recoup from the prolonged sympathetic state. And so what I like to do is encourage this very incremental self-tending system, which is anything non-goal oriented, without tech, without like anyone else really, and a guided meditation on airplane mode or some music or whatever. But basically get on the floor with your massage balls and your foam roller or your guided meditation, or go on a walk with no tech and no shoes. And the root method has a lot of actual self-exploration frameworks. So what to do, because we need sometimes a framework to start with. And then I always tell people, like, once you start doing this, you're not going to need it anymore, right? Or you're going to love it so much it will, you won't need me in your ear because it's in your body. But a lot of the time when I suggest this time with self, this tending, there's a reaction of like, it's boring, I don't have time for it, or it's scary. I've heard that more than I ever thought I would. That it's like, oh, that sounds scary, especially because I also ask women to confront their bodies, like look at your body and touch your body. And that's just like, woo, like so far away. So we have to do it in increments for some people. But basically, I have an offering weekly where women, we do movement and breath, and we do it in a way that really teaches you about your own body, and gives you a reason and a biomechanical and energetic reason for a movement and how to calibrate it to your needs. And, honoring the different, places you might be in your, in your life or in your cycle. And then, I offer courses and stuff and one-on-one work, all of those things, especially, around body literacy, pelvic health. But this is really like, you don't need me, I'm here, and we all need somebody sometimes. And community is an incredibly important part of our healing and of making all of this make sense. We have to recultivate that belonging when we start orienting inward and guiding ourselves from within, then where's that new group of resonant people, of guides and sisters, right? That's super important. I also have a free women's circle that I do monthly for that reason. And we just have a speaker speak their downloads and their, wisdom to the group. And then we share around that subject. And my point is, really, all you really have to do is carve out time. And even if you have to put it in your iPhone calendar as a reoccurring appointment with self, we have to cultivate a relationship with ourselves just like we would anybody we love. Like, we cannot advocate for ourselves if we don't know ourselves. We can't be known by anybody if we don't know ourselves. And when I think about like me as a mother, like, how do I build relationship with my child? I spend time with him. I get to know him. I know these details, I know every inch of my partner's body and my child's body. And it's amazing to me that women wouldn't want to know their own body on that intimate level. But we've been taught to be so afraid. So that first layer is just believing in yourself, believing in your power, and removing shame and fear, and starting to build relationship with your senses, with your sensuality and your body.
Oh man, that just the smile that is on my face, right now, if you are joining us, if you have been listening to this conversation and it is really speaking to you right now, you can give yourself permission to do this. Give yourself permission to begin your relationship with yourself and to prioritize that relationship as you build it. So, Amalia, I know that you have some really beautiful breath work instructions and practices to help us get started. Would you mind sharing one of those with us?
Sure. Yes, I would love to. So what I'm going to share with you guys today is we're going to blend two breath practices, like move from one seamlessly to the next. We'll go a little bit faster than we usually would, but these are also free resources that I would be happy to link for anyone who wants a kind of a slower dive into it. So we begin with intelligent design breath, and that is very simple. This is just breathing the way we were designed to breathe without any additional imperative. Like, we're not trying to be fast or slow or big, but just feel how we're designed. And I am guiding you through the anatomical visualization so that we can start to feel these structures and how they work together, because a lot of people don't know how they are designed to breathe. And so then when they maybe receive some misinformation, they can embody it quickly. Like, I was told earlier in my career that you're supposed to hold your abdominals in because it's good for your posture. And the abdominals are reflexive. They don't need you to decide to hold them in. If they're functioning properly, they turn on to the degree that they need to when they're called upon. Therefore, you don't have to hold tension in your abdominals for your posture, just like no other animal has to do that, right? But if we don't really know how we're designed and how we're made, we are more subject to misinformation, right? So we start with just feeling what it feels like to breathe into an unobstructed vessel, have some basic visualizations of what's happening, and then we will add a pelvic floor activation. And just so that I don't have to dive into the intellectual part during it, I will just offer this now, that the pelvic floor activation is designed to really bring your attention to the relaxation and the spaciousness of the pelvic floor as much as it is the lift and activation. And we're going to do a little prep here. I would like everyone to do a Kegel right now. Do a Kegel. Feel it in your body. Feel the space around your vagina and feel the space in the lower abdomen. Okay? And then I want you to relax. Now notice you can still breathe even while you're doing a Kegel. Okay? So we might forget that. We can hold some integrity in those muscles and also breathe. So please do. So now, most people experience a Kegel something like this. This is the vaginal opening. This is the Kegel. It's sort of a clamping or a shutting down and a tightening. And instead, what I want us to try to do is more of this, like a lift. Like you're just grabbing a little cotton ball or a little rosebud and you're drawing it up to the center of your body. So now I want you to try to activate in that way. You feel all the tissue around your vulva softening. And then as you exhale, it's just wrapping up a little bit and lifting to the center of your body, like you're trying to bring it up into the womb space. I want you to hold that for a moment while still breathing and notice any difference you're cultivating between this and that vaginal clamping that most women do in a Kegel. And just feel the lower abdominals and how there's a co-activation there and maybe a little bit more of a functional one, less rigid. And then you can relax. So I am going to continue to visually guide, but I want to make that distinction that the pelvic floor activation is not a fist, not a clamp, not a tightening. And it's like a sparkle, a turn on. You are allowed to be turned on in this breath, okay? Permission granted. Please get turned on. Okay, starting with intelligent design breath, we're just going to think about our structure, our dome stacking the top of our head, our respiratory diaphragm and rib cage, our pelvis and pelvic floor. So these are all aligned. We tend to move out of this alignment. So if you need a wall or, just find that space where it feels easy to breathe into all sides of the body and there's not a lot of tension. And we're just going to notice the air moving in through the nose and into the back of the throat. Just notice the coolness and the quality of the air so that you start tuning into your senses and your subtleties, letting your mind's eye watch the air move. So eyes closed and watch the pathway of air in through the nose, into the back of the throat, into the lungs. And the lungs expand 360. And as they do, the rib cage also expands 360. So if you're a person that tends to breathe up into the shoulders and chest, see if you can feel the breath press into the space between the shoulder blades. See if you can feel the lateral movement of your rib cage. You can even place your hands right on your ribs and feel them broaden. And then feel them come close to the center line as you exhale. And so some of this may not be available, but we are picturing it so that we can guide our tissue and our structure to more optimal functional breathing. So now place your hand on your diaphragm. It's that space where the ribs split, our solar plexus. And while you breathe, just notice what's happening under your hand. And I'm now asking you to make space in the back of your throat. As you inhale, noticing that as you open up the back of the throat, that dome creates more space for the dome of the diaphragm to also move more dynamically. So constricting the throat is going to constrict the diaphragm, opening the throat, tongue on the roof of the mouth, so mouth is closed, but the back of the throat is open. And then you can place your hands down on your waist or lower back, anywhere in the trunk of the body, and just notice that the inhale also expands here because we are one pressure system. So the ribs expand, but also the tissue of the back and the belly and even the pelvis expand. And then bringing the awareness to the pelvic bones. You can place your hand on the pelvic bones and inhale. They broaden a bit. And then either with your mind's eye or your hands, you can pay attention or touch your sits bones or your pelvic floor, the space between your sits bones, tailbone, and pubic bone. And notice that on the inhale, there is a broadening of that space and the pelvic floor is mirroring the diaphragm, so it draws down too. On the exhale, it relaxes up the body. So now we can picture that the inhale is broadening us from rib cage and spine and pelvis. And then the exhale, as the ribs glide in, the domes lift, and there's a growing, the spine lengthens a bit. On the inhale, we broaden. On the exhale, the domes rise, the pelvic floor and diaphragm, and the top of our head lifts just a little bit because we grow taller just a little bit. So that's the intelligent design breathing. That is not adding an engagement, but just feeling the movement of the air and in the body. And now we'll bring all of our attention down to the pelvic floor. And you can put your hand on your pelvic floor. You can lie on your back or be in hands and knees or child's pose. Anything that will help you bring attention to that space between the tailbone, pubic bone, and sits bones. And you're just feeling that inhale like a blooming rose. So I want you to really feel the opening of that space and the appropriate pressure. And then exhale, I want you to imagine wrapping up that tissue a bit and lifting it up to the center of your body. So it's like you brought that rosebud up to the dark earth space of the womb. And then inhale, it moves down through the vaginal canal and opens and blooms. And then exhale, there's a wrap, a hug, and a lift. And you can pause in that exhale just for a moment and feel that kind of sparkly turn on. It's not tight or rigid or bearing down. It's a delicious, sparkly feeling. And then inhale, feel the bloom and open. And this is just as valuable and important as the activation. So really try to feel into that space. Exhale, wrapping that rose back into its bud and lifting up, up, up to the center of your body. Inhale, one more bloom. And exhale, lift. And just pause in that lift for a moment. Let it feel good. And then just return to your easy breath. And return to the space when you feel ready.
I felt so much more expansion and softness in that pulling up. It was just this it was like liquid movement. It was this sort of sparkling gold. And it was this really warm, like warm melted chocolate, like this really delicious, gentle movement that I have not experienced in that way. I thank you so much for that.
You're so welcome. Yes, that kind of gliding warm honey thing that you're talking about, that's also in service to the nature of our healthy tissue. That's how our healthy tissue works. It slides and glides and is super hydrated and like smushy feeling, right? So that's that quality that you're sensing in the breath is really helping to nourish the tissue to be that way.
Oh, that is so huge. And as someone with a connective tissue disorder, that is something that my body has not had space and permission, and my mind hasn't allowed my body to experience that. And to have that experience today in this degree has just been so elegant, for lack of any other word. That was just elegant.
I think that's just you tuning into the intelligent design of your body. That's the beauty of it, is that we are so elegantly, gracefully designed. We have been taught to believe that our body requires so much override and aggression in order for it to be right, that all of our body guidance is like leading us to ruin, and that we're inherently lazy beings, that it's a very different paradigm. So when we start to tune into this like elegance and intelligence and the kind of miracle that is each cell and it's each directive, and start to really believe and feel that, then all of these little issues that we feel are like whack-a-mole start to resolve and all feel connected. And so you can always be in service to all of these things just in one practice, just in one, nourishing, vitality oriented way of living.
Oh, thank you so much for the gift of your knowledge today, your zone of genius, your heart, and for this practice that you've shared with us. I'm going to have a link to amaliamarielee.com down in the show notes. Make sure you go look at all the amazing offerings that Amalia has, from her weekly class to her courses and her one-on-one work. There's so much that she offers, and this root method is truly just life-giving. It is truly where we step into our feminine personal power, and it is one of the restorative elements to an optimum steady state. Thank you so much for joining us today. Be sure you tune in next week as we go even deeper. How do we begin to flourish forward? Take care, everybody.
Thanks for being here. It's been quite a ride. Energy mastery, let's turn the tide. Top shelf guests, dropping wisdom bombs. Join us next week, where the energy's strong. Beyond chronic burnout, we're breaking free.